Hello all, it's Exo Man, and today I want to talk about something that's weighing on my mind, and it may be something I've talked about before. I'm pretty sure I have, but it's communication. And it occurs to me that it's not something that is handed to us. Not all of us. I wouldn't hazard a guess as to what percentage of the population of the earth have learned to communicate by adulthood, but I'd say it would be sadly low. But if you're at all interested in any kind of abiding relationship, any kind of longevity in your relationship, it is absolutely a critical skill. It's paramount to a good relationship. And I'm talking about all familial and love relationships, spousal relationships, relationships with our kids, etc. And we find that sometimes we need to part ways with people, that we're just not going to see eye to eye. And we have different life philosophies and different core values, and it's just not going to work. But most of the time, what I'm talking about are relationships where we butt heads when we could communicate and open that channel and have meaningful relationships. And I'm not just talking about talking. When I say communicate, it means a whole different thing. It means on a more personal, meaningful level we are talking. That's communicating. To produce an effect, a desired effect in our relationship, that is communicating. And yes, it is very much our jobs as parents to not only understand to communicate, but to pass that along to our children. That's the only way it's going to happen. If we learn it ourselves, we introduce it as habitual with our kids, and we teach it to them. I actively taught this to my children, or at least I tried. So what my background in this, when I was a youngster growing up, we didn't communicate, we yelled. We lived what most would call a slum life. My mother and my siblings and myself. And it was just that kind of situation where there couldn't be the refinement that my mother wanted. She grew up in a lovely, she had a lovely childhood and was taught, proper, really good values and manners and things like that in the early part of last century. But all that was, most of the skills that she would have developed were damaged by a tumultuous life with an abusive husband. So I didn't end up learning about communication until I was in my young 20s. When I say this, I mean it. It is a real and meaningful thing to learn communication. I don't mean that just in general. I mean specifically, we need to learn how to communicate with one another. We need to learn to communicate with one another, and that's something that too few of us have the ability to do, and we can develop this. And let me tell you, when I was a young man, I guess it was about 23, I had a beautiful woman, and we were engaged. And there came a time when it didn't look like things were going so well, and I clammed up, and I didn't know what to say and what to do because I had a problem. And the problem was I had decided internally not to move forward with this marriage, and I couldn't speak, I couldn't talk. And this woman sat me down after, a week or so of this, and said, "You need to talk to me. You need to communicate with me." And when she said that in that fashion, she said, "You need to communicate with me." It occurred to me that she was saying something that I was unaccustomed to. She was talking about a concept that I thought I knew, but I didn't know. And that's the juncture that's a place where many of us stay for our whole lives, right there, before learning to communicate, not learning to communicate. We get stuck. We don't realize that it is a real thing. It is a necessary and vital skill to communicate. And so much is born of this. And I can't imagine the countless tragedy over the millennia of people who haven't communicated. It's terrible. So I finally opened up, and I spoke my truth, and that day I left that house that we shared. I had to walk away. She said, "All right, you've spoken your truth. You don't want to be married. I want the relationship to end." And she was right. She was right. I had committed, then I had withdrawn, and that was a sign that the relationship was not going to move forward. And that needed to be communicated. But often what needs to be communicated, what needs to be laid out is terms of engagement. How do we work through things? You just need to talk about things before they can be worked through. You can't just ignore problems and expect them to go away. A lot of people want to have a relationship, but they first want the person to suffer or know how they've suffered, or there's always something. They want to even a score before the relationship can move forward. And that's not the way life works. We're not perfect. No one is perfect. We make mistakes, and the other person, if you make a mistake, another person may get angry with you, or vice versa. And then there needs to be the communication so that there can be the healing. You can't just expect to have this all worked out through osmosis. There's no magic. You have to sit down. You have to interface. And you have to work it out. You have to apologize. You have to accept apologies. You have to accept other people's weaknesses. I've had my problems with people, and I have people, like I said before, that I've had to just walk away from because there are toxic relationships. But I think people have a real sense quite often that they have a relationship that is not toxic, it's just not worked out. There are just things left unsaid. And if you have a relationship like that, you have to find a way to work this out, to work out to communicate. You have to figure out a way to make that happen, and whether that is through outside help or just a sit down, an agreed time and place, and an agreement that we're going to have this discussion, we're going to have this talk. So that's all. I just wanted to say that because it's just, I know there are so many people out there who've just let good, meaningful relationships just flounder and go nowhere, and people want to exact vengeance and make other people suffer or settle scores, or it doesn't happen that way. It only happens through you and I talking things out, working things out. That's a loving gesture when you set out to talk with somebody and let them know that you love them enough to want to work through it. Otherwise, you go to your grave angry and never having fully realized the love that you have for that person. So give it some thought. That's really all I wanted to say. I just wanted to share those few thoughts with you. Let's learn to communicate. Okay, bye and thank you.